Welcome to the Microsoft Tech Innovators Spotlight podcast. And today we're fortunate to have Paul Walker from iManage. It's a platform that runs on Microsoft Azure and powers knowledge work across the legal industry. But first, as always, we have a co-host who's very familiar with our customer. And today I have my talented colleague, Jennifer Martinez. Jennifer, welcome.
Thanks. So excited to be here with iManage.
Yes, thanks, Jennifer. Well, Paul, I will introduce you as, I know you're the Global Solutions Director for iManage, and no pressure, but you're our first guest from the UK on the podcast. So welcome.
What could go wrong? What could go wrong, Chad? Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Nothing could go wrong. We've overcome the cultural differences. You're drinking tea, we're drinking coffee, but I think we'll come together and have a wonderful discussion. So, Paul, like I said, you manage global solutions delivery for iManage. You're in the legal industry. Tell us a little bit, for our listeners that are new to iManage, a little bit about yourself and some of the problems you do solve for legal teams at iManage.
Okay, thank you, Chad. So as you say, Paul Walker, I'm the Senior Director of Outcomes here at iManage. I lead a global team of former practicing lawyers who help translate our customers' AI or our AI capabilities into business value for our customers. Our biggest markets are the law firm markets and the corporate legal departments of large major international corporates, but we also service a lot of the accounting industry, etc., so the professional service industry. And ultimately, my team's job is to impart their wisdom, their practicing experience, and translate that into the technical reality and to drive the use cases into our customer base.
Awesome. Well, so Paul, tell us a little bit. What's uniquely different about your approach today versus 5 years ago? I know you mentioned AI off the bat. What has been the biggest change for you?
Yeah, so ultimately, iManage is a platform. iManage is a platform which is trusted by around about 4,500 organizations around the globe today, and those organizations represent some of the most secure and sensitive organizations in terms of the data they hold, the intelligence they hold within their content on the entire planet. And if you think about what many of these organizations have been involved in over what can be very, very long histories, they've pretty much encapsulated every social, economic change that has existed on the planet. It's enshrined within documentation, in laws, in agreements, etc. And it's embedded and staved within the iManage platform. Now, up until 2 years ago, there was a need for our customers to do that. They needed to maintain the record of what the agreement was and how we got to that final statement of fact, how we got there. What was the email conversations? What were the conversations that we agreed on? Who decided what? And how did we end up here? And they have to do that for regulatory reasons, but they also need to do that for their clients so that a client could use that service to recall effectively the decisions that have been made in the past that might affect the business in the future. What changed 2 years ago, what changed for all of us, was Gen AI. Gen AI appeared in all of our worlds. And ultimately, what it did was unlock something that is fairly unique to these industries that wasn't possible before. The ability for a machine to truly understand the human language and be able to operate and understand that in a way that a human often will try to understand and read human language. So that has opened up this massive opportunity to the world to finally have a machine automate and do some of the tasks that human beings were doing previously. Now, again, we have to be very careful with that. We're not saying this is a replacement for a lawyer. I'm going to discuss that a little bit more in a little detail. But what it very much is an assistant to the lawyer to help them better understand what are sometimes very long, very complex, very specific language written into this very specific content. And that's really what's changed in 5 years. The opportunities changed.
You brought up some of those key points there of this is incredibly sensitive data and this has to be accurate, and trust is critical. And, it's the client's trust in the lawyer and the lawyer's trust in their assistant, human or digital. And so for iManage, you guys talk about AI confidence. In practice, what does that really mean for a law firm or a corporate legal department when we think about AI confidence?
Yeah, so there are a number of different dimensions to AI confidence. When we talk about AI confidence, it's the trust in the technology and the confidence in the data that it's using to inform the decisions that are ultimately informing the end user who's then making decisions off that data. And those kind of two critical dimensions are ultimately what form someone's understanding. Now, when we look at AI confidence in particular detail about the technology, there are really 4 elements to my mind that really become really, really important to a lawyer, someone who's asking a question of document. Provenance. So show your work. So when I get an associate to perform a task for me, a research task, I don't just want to see the outputs. I want to see how they got to those outputs. What routes did they take to come up with that answer and those set of answers that they provided to me? So provenance is a really key capability. Another capability is auditability. So understanding why this. Why did we get to this decision? Why did we come to this outcome? So this often results in a very long stream of communications, understanding previous communications, to understand how that outcome was eventually reached. And that outcome, often it's enshrined in the past, but it's also an ongoing communication that you need to maintain to be able to utilize that again in the future. Another critical factor of AI confidence is what we call containment. So the professional service industries, and particularly the law industry, has something that doesn't really exist to a lot of us when we're in a sort of more consumer or commercial world. And that's something called an ethical wall. And many of you might not have come across an ethical wall before, or what it means and why it's important. An ethical wall is something that's put in place. It's a virtual barrier that is put in place within, say, an individual law firm to protect one team from another team. Okay, so if a law firm has to operate and do work for Pepsi, the team that work on Pepsi shouldn't have any knowledge of what happens on the Coke account. They should not have any information that might influence the outcome of their relationship with that client. Now, in some instances, you're actually working on the same transaction, same deal, and you're trying to keep 2 separate teams apart. And so containment, making sure that certain content doesn't leak into the team of the other, is an absolute vital and critical component to how law firms operate. And making sure, as we start to think about the opportunities of AI, and it can be many, many opportunities, how does the AI engine, as we start thinking about agents, how does it protect itself from leaking this data into one side versus the other? Again, it becomes a critical component to AI confidence. It's not just a matter of presenting all the data to the AI engine, letting it make the decision. It has to be physically separated. And again, maybe we'll discuss that a little bit later about some of the things we're thinking about in terms of the agentic future and how we protect some of these agents from themselves. I think the final element to convey AI confidence to me is what we call completeness. So AI confidence, ultimately what firms sit upon is a wealth of knowledge. That knowledge is locked away in content, in documents, in emails, in Teams conversations, for example, sat inside the iManage platform that obviously runs on Microsoft Azure. Ultimately, when the lawyer is sat there asking a question of that data, they need confidence that they've got 100% of the answer. It's not appropriate to get 80% of the answer. For convenience, for performance, for stability, we only gave you 80% of the answer. The lawyer needs to know they are seeing everything that is responsive to the question that they're asking about data. And so completeness is, again, another piece of the AI confidence message that we've positioned in the market.
So I think we'll get back to the ethical walls, but that last one you just mentioned there, that completeness. What are you guys doing in product to make sure that these AI outputs are trusted and explainable so that your legal teams do understand that they can rely on them? How are you guys approaching that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jennifer. So, I think fundamentally one of the very simple things we do from the outset is we ground responses inside the content. So today, we do not use the larger LLM brain, so to speak. We use the brain to read, to make sense of the content, but we don't use the brain of the LLM to interpret or give opinion on the content. We use it simply to answer questions enshrined and based in that content. So grounding is a really key part of that. The other part of it is really about the user experience. What we found in the early days of generative AI and exposing those kind of capabilities to end users, they would ask questions of content, they'd get a generative response. And actually, when we kind of looked at the flow of how they were working, they're often downloading the document, opening it up into Microsoft Word, doing Control F, going searching for the search term to find and validate the answer. Now, if you're working on one document, that's not so bad. But again, we work in an industry where volume is always a factor. And a lawyer is doing this hundreds and hundreds of times a day, sometimes. And so we found the actual efficiency gain of the AI was being massively truncated, lost effectively, because the user was going and fact-checking anyway. It was actually taking longer. So actually what we built into the AI capabilities, not just the citing where it came from, it came from this document, but actually also grounding and citing exactly where in the document it came from. Which parts of the document did the AI engine use to prescribe this answer to the question I'm asking of that? It also then takes me very quickly into the dynamic preview of that item. So again, I'm not having to wait for download speeds and et cetera to open that. So again, it's just looking at that workflow, looking at how the users are really working, and then making sure that the evidence is presented at all the key kind of points where the user needs it to confirm that. Because otherwise, let's say we've learned historically, they will then go and double check their homework, and that then wastes the efficiency gain.
No, that's interesting, Paul. You definitely have to kind of factor in some things some of our other customers don't, being in the legal space. But what you talked about is meeting the users in their workflow is something that's pretty common. How have you been able to kind of concretely look at the value? Is it just cycle time reductions as they're reviewing things, better findability, or is it are there other areas of savings as you guys are kind of introducing these AI, I guess we could call it assisted workflows?
It's one of the things that it's not just unique to the legal industry, it's unique to the world. I think everyone is struggling to put an ROI on AI. Mm-hmm. Actually, our own CIO said to me about a month and a half ago, I was in the office and we were talking about some of the ROI of actually some of the AI tools that we use internally. And I said, one way to test the ROI is try to take it away from people. They scream and shout. That's your ROI. Yeah. And I mean, that's my own personal ROI for AI. Yeah. If you take my AI tools away from me today, I'm lost. I now don't really know how to function at the performance level I'm functioning at with AI today without those tools. And so the ROI is becoming difficult because it's not one single repeatable use case. It's a collection of use cases that are dynamically happening on a daily basis. We have many law firm customers who will look at for certain things they do. Like a great example is when they are drafting motions. So motions are something that a lawyer will do when they will submit a motion to the court to make something happen. Motion to compel, a motion to dismiss a case. So they'll build a case, it's enshrined within the document, and they'll submit it to the court to make something happen. And these motions are often formed of precedents, things that have happened before, other motions that they'll research and download, review, and take those snippets and draft it into their motions. Now, as you can imagine, inside the law firm, this drafting happens. There's lots of little inputs that go into this in terms of research. There's a bit of approval, probably, might go up to the partner, etc. There's different levels, kind of validate it and draft it before it goes off to the court. Now, that process for, like an associate type lawyer, you're looking somewhere in the region of 5 to 6 hours of work, depending on the case, the complexity of the case. So on average, you're looking at 5 to 6 hours of work of doing some research and then doing the drafting, manually combining these documents. With AI, we're not at 0, we're not at 1 second or 1 minute, but we're down to about 2 hours, an hour and a half to 2 hours. And that's figures that we've seen come from, AmLaw 200 law firms in the US. They are citing those kind of figures where, there's 3 to 4 hours of lawyer time that are being gained in efficiency from just that one use case. And that's just one use case. There's hundreds of other kind of drafting use cases. There's hundreds of review cases in terms of due diligence reviews, etc. So it's very hard to come up with a number. So I always feel disappointed when I come up with the answers to this question.
Yeah.
But as I say, take it away from them and they'll scream. And we're seeing now evidence of that happen finally in the market.
Speaking of, so what is the one use case that you, from an AI standpoint, that you did not expect legal teams to love, but yeah, as you would say, they would scream the loudest if you took it away from them? Is there one where you were a little surprised with the use case?
I think some of the use cases I've seen, I think one was actually in a corporate legal scenario. And this is not by all means prevalent yet, but I think it's becoming prevalent. Corporate legal teams operate very differently to a law firm. Obviously, they're not offering, law firm is billing and offering a service to corporates and corporations who consume their services. Corporate legals are a cost center. They're internally operated. They have very much stricter budgets. They don't bill for their time internally unless there's some kind of cost centering going on. And really, they are very, very budget conscious. They don't have huge budgets and they have to be very mindful about what they spend money on. One of the biggest things that any corporate legal team does, and probably the Microsoft team are testament to this, is they answer a lot of questions and queries from the business. And a lot of those questions are repeat questions. It's the same question being asked time and time again by potentially different people, but sometimes also by the same person. And they're just asking the same question. And you've got someone who's generally a very highly paid, skilled individual sitting there responding that. And often the response might be, I need to go and find a document in something like iManage and hand it back to that person. And that might happen over Teams, it might happen over email, it might happen over a bunch of other different types of mechanisms. And actually one of the best use cases I've seen for AI is where customers are actually able to put a front face on that. And actually, it's not quite up to a chatbot yet, because I don't think anyone has the faith yet to have it completely automated. But actually what's happening in a number of organizations is the question is coming in from the business. The engine is building the answer. It's then passing the answer to the lawyer. The lawyer goes, yes, 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 no, 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 and pushes the answer out. So there's still a human in the loop helping the process. That's still a key thing to make sure the answer is correct. But that's one of probably the most surprising. I didn't think lawyers would be open to that so quickly, to giving up that control. But what it is doing is it's massively reducing the amount of distraction and interruption that happens in these lawyers today. So they can actually focus on the bigger things they need to do rather than just answering this little query. What was the indemnity clause that we agreed with client X 4 years ago? Get the answer for the person directly rather than them having to seek it out.
I can imagine that's thousands of hours that get saved in corporate questions. I know I'm guilty of sending those over.
and I think this is, again, one of the kind of truisms of AI generally is that it's probably just work that wasn't getting done before. A lot of what I'm able to now achieve with AI it's just stuff I never got to before. That's what it's enabling for me. It's not replacing what I do, the most important task, but it is replacing some of the stuff that I just never, ever, ever, ever. It was always on the B list of things I needed to do.
Absolutely. Well, we talked a little bit about value. I think, Jennifer, I wanted to move a little bit to where you see your clients getting stuck sometimes, or where it stalls out. Is it, and maybe how you get them unstuck? Is it around prompt design? We see a lot of mention of just like the metadata quality and on iManage's website. Where do you kind of help clients get unstuck the most, Paul?
I mean, I think the good news, is after kind of 2 years of absolute racing to get our heads around this technology and the possibilities of this technology, the technology in a good way is beginning to plateau. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't major change ahead, and we can see where some of that change is happening, specifically around agentic builds and being able to build more and more agents to do jobs. But in terms of the intelligence of the engines, we are starting to see a plateau. And that means that we're not all in this constant race to kind of keep up with the latest. And it's proving beneficial because now what our customers are able to do is focus on one of the biggest things that was hardest to focus on when things are changing, which is the adoption. How do we handle the change management in the business? When things are changing so rapidly behind the scenes, new LLMs with new capabilities, new ways of doing it. Every time you landed on a set procedure or process. There's a new version of the LLM, and it's right, let's go back and see how this affects what we were doing before. That plateau is now introducing some standardization, I guess. And customers are now normalizing those use cases. We're seeing much more standardization of use cases across customers. And they're now just focused on how do we just make sure this works inside the businesses. Most businesses now have some sort of mandate from their boards, etc., to push down onto the management teams about how they should adopt AI, making sure that AI is at the foremost of our thinking in terms of the processes that we need to build and adopt. Exactly the same for legal teams. This is pushed down onto the practice area leads, the people who run the different practice groups, to say, look at your business. And they are almost independent businesses in many respects. Look at your business, look at how it runs, look at the types of things and jobs that your teams do, and now how can the AI apply? And as I say, when we look at a law firm, and let's say we look at a 4,000 user law firm, we tend to look at it as one big whole. But within a 4,000 user law firm, you've probably got 500 different, for want of a better word, fiefdoms, all with their own effectively mini businesses inside that law firm. And so they all have different needs and different potential usages of AI. And that change management is now what we are seeing across the industry and what needs to happen.
Yeah, that's really good points. And I think, when you're expressing that original novelty and excitement and rush and exploration, and for the first couple of years, it was focused around, how do we try this? I would love to just, throw AI at all of our old legal documents and have it guide me as to what the right next clause is to write. And, a lot of that rush of exploration, which was needed for people to become familiar and start to find the healthy boundaries of what it can do. One of the things working with iManage, that I love the synergy in the way that Microsoft looks at this also, when we're looking at where AI can get its answers from, there's a space for creativity, aka hallucination, where AI is amazing, but there's groundedness and there are techniques to get that groundedness. And a lot of times this just shines a light on data quality and underlying and organization. And this is the history and underpinning of what iManage has been doing. Can you talk a bit about how, now that people are settling into the adoption, how you guys are helping around that, metadata quality, finding the right content, and the work that customers who are already working with you, kind of that step up that they have?
It's a good question, and it's good statement, Jennifer. Ultimately, as I said, kind of at the start, and a law firm is ultimately built on the knowledge of the organization, that collective knowledge. Now, historically, that's been enshrined most often in people's heads. The way you get up to the law firm is, you build the biggest knowledge base and you apply that to more and more use cases and areas of law, and that's how you kind of get ahead. That's a challenge for the organization. It was encapsulated in that content, but it was hard to leverage that content. Now, as I said at the start, one of the greatest things about AI is it's not just its ability to generate an idea. Most lawyers don't want AI to come up with ideas. There are use cases for it, but they're not looking for an idea. They're looking to use another brain, to interpret something they're doing to help them be more efficient. They want assistance, and many, many assistants to help them do those tasks. They don't want to replace their brain. They don't want to replace their ideas. They simply want to help getting to an answer quicker and being able to do more in an allotted piece of time. So I think, to me, so much of the law is also enshrined, not just in the content within the repositories, but the context around that content. And by context, we can describe that in metadata, in technical terms, in terms of metadata. How do we understand that this document that we're looking at, what it relates to? It's a document, let's say it's a share purchase agreement. But a share purchase agreement in the US looks different to a share purchase agreement in the UK, which looks different to a share purchase agreement in France. Now, if the system, the AI engine, doesn't effectively understand that those are three different jurisdictions with three different laws, then it's unable. And what you do see happen is that it's not quite hallucination, because it's actually grounded in the content, but it kind of merges effectively 3 different laws and jurisdictions into one, and you kind of get this strange generative response. Now, and what it generally ends up meaning is the end user has to actually pick through that response, and it's more work to pick through it than actually just to give it the original context from the start. So we think that the context, when you're asking a question of the system, the context is vital. And there are a number of different kind of key contexts that are relevant to the law firm industry in particular. The clients that it relates to, the industries that those clients are part of, the matters. So within a client, we have different types of matters. We have a jurisdiction. So where is the governing law and jurisdiction of this document? And also sometimes, there's kind of an external source, which is kind of researching story, which is the law. It's what is the regulation, what is the law, the external factor that has an impact on this. Because laws aren't stable, they change. Each country has its own laws, and they change regularly, and there are international laws, etc. And so when a law has changed and it's no longer relevant, you don't want, again, that leaking into your relevancy model and affecting the generative output. So ultimately what iManage aims to do, and we've done this throughout our entire history, is enable the organization to put context around documents and emails. You don't just store them in a big store and hope for the best. They go in the context of the client, the matter, the type of matter, the jurisdiction, so that when I'm asking questions, I can say, go and get me the force majeure clauses from our license agreements that we've done for the UK for Sony Pictures, for example. And by adding that kind of extra dimension to the question, it's able to laser in on exactly the exact force majeure clauses that we're looking for inside those agreements. So context is everything. Information architecture is everything. And I think again, going back to that kind of change program, one thing I think that everyone has learned is that, I think there were some initial hopes that AI would just solve the context problem, that we wouldn't have to do anything around information architecture. Yeah. AI will solve it. It'll take part. It hasn't, not to this day. I'm not saying it won't ever do that. Still, information architecture, the people who are getting the most value out of AI are the people who've got structure within their organization, who's able to point the AI at the right pockets of data for the right different use cases. And that's where they get the best benefit.
Wonderful.
Love that. A lot of context, regulatory compliance, definitely not simple. But if you tried to simplify it, is there one metric you look for just to prove that AI is working for your clients?
A smile on the managing partner's face. That's the one metric. If I can get a picture of a smiling face, I'm happy.
I'm sure those are easy folks to please.
It is. I mean, some of it is right. There are metrics we look at. We look at there's some fairly traditional metrics around knowledge management. So when someone is asking a question, what is the speed to an answer? And you can see that when you look at kind of audit trail data, because you can see the question coming in, you can see the clicks. So which documents effectively did they click on? And then which one did they linger on? So which one did they stay on for a sustained period of time? That means they've probably found the answer at that point, and it's a good indicator. Now, if they're asking questions and they're not doing any subsequent quick clicks, that shows your AI is wrong. It shows your search is wrong. It shows they're not finding the right answers. It's a bit like the zero results found test. If you're getting 0 results found, it's either the engine that's broke or the question's broke, or you just don't have the content to answer the question. So that's one metric we do look at. We do worry about that kind of metric because it's a lagging indicator.
Paul, really appreciate that insight. I know you kind of alluded, the space continues to move quickly, but it has slowed down a little bit. But you've also talked about what's coming next and kind of the agentic future. Is that where iManage is focused on, or is it more around integrations with the Microsoft ecosystem? What's next for iManage?
Wow, I've got like 2 or 3 hours here.
Yeah.
What next?
Busy.
I'm going to actually give 3 answers. Sorry to not focus and give one, but I think it needs 3 answers because they all interlink. I think one thing we're focused on is the openness of the platform and the accessibility of data. How do we, now that we can leverage everything that's stored within these platforms with this great context about that helps us understand what it is, how can people connect the right tools to that? We live in a world where, yes, we have some AI tools embedded in our platform, but we're not going to be only AI engine in the platform in the world that needs to connect to that. Microsoft have Copilot, and many of our customers have Copilot. They want to come in from their Copilot interfaces when they're doing various kind of drafting work in Word, for example, when they're drafting emails in Outlook. They want to leverage some of that data to help them with those jobs, for example. There are very, practice-specific or legal-specific tools out there, like the Harvey and the Legora capabilities. Again, customers want to leverage some of those capabilities, and so they want to get to the data. That leads me on to another kind of area of focus, which is one of the biggest concerns across our customer bases as they look at all these different AI tools, and there will be more. We saw 750 legal tech AI startups appear in the last 2 years, just to give you a rough number. As they look to leverage those and potentially try those in different groups, security becomes ever more problematic and more of a challenge. The idea of taking data out, putting it into another platform is a troubling concept because maintaining the life cycle, versions tend to happen inside those platforms. It takes on a life of its own, which is the master. And so, again, opening up this platform, but making sure that customers can leverage the different AI tools without having to move data around, without having to distribute data to lots of different places that they can't control, is really, really a big focus for us. I think the other focus, and I don't know if it's just a focus for us, I think it's a focus for everyone. I've become a reborn geek, shall we say. I started playing a lot with vibe coding and Claude Code. I am a coder by trade, so it's like going back 20 years in many respects. But playing with that technology and seeing the possibility, how quickly you can build an app to do a job, how quickly that app is functional, how quickly it can communicate with different APIs and perform jobs. I think we're about to see this kind of fundamental shift in the way that people consume applications. I think for 20 years, we've seen the standardization of apps. People want less because less was easier to manage from an IT standpoint. People want less customization, more off the shelf, because we all got burnt in the early 2000s with building extensive customizations that then we had to kind of unengineer, and that was problematic. But I think we're going to see kind of a rebirth of the custom app. And then probably the next big challenge for technology teams out there is, how do we manage what could be thousands and thousands and thousands of ephemeral apps that appear within our enterprise ecosystems? So this is, that's where we're focused. How can we produce more dynamic user interfaces and user experiences? Does one user experience fit all? Do we have different user experiences for different people? And say some of the things that we used to measure, the ability to deliver a user experience, have just gone. The fact it would take us 1 year to 2 years to build one, that's now taking us weeks rather than months and years. So I think not a simple answer to your question, Chad. I gave you about 6 different answers, but they do all converge. We are rethinking ultimately from the ground up the experience and how we can leverage the data within the platform, always with security in mind.
So if there were 2 words, or I'll give you a range, 1 to 3 words that you want in people's heads about iManage at the end of 2026.
Wow, Jennifer. 3 words, only 3. You can tell I'm not a man of brevity. Wow. Open, intelligent platform. I've just made that up on the fly.
Well, asking the hard questions, Jennifer. I like it. Well, Paul, we appreciate you sharing your insights with us. You're our first guest that's kind of been in this legal space, but it's interesting to see a lot of the similarities you talked about at the end there, being curious, experimenting with the technology. You talk about meeting your customers where they're at, solving their actual problems, and and also just doing that with AI in a responsible way. So a lot of similarities, but obviously some unique opportunities as well as challenges to overcome. So we really appreciate you sharing that with us, and speak on behalf of Jennifer that we're grateful for the time, and we thank everyone for listening to the Microsoft Tech Innovators Spotlight podcast. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Microsoft Tech Innovators Spotlight podcast. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to stay connected for more episodes where we continue to uncover the stories that are shaping the future of AI and technology.